as we look forward to Saturday. It is our home opener, but it's never really going to feel like that debut at our home stadium until it's full of fans.
After 1 month on the outside looking in, 1 month of nothing but practice and a few scrimmages, Inter Miami will finally play their home opener on Saturday against the MLS's back tournament runners-up Orlando City. This is Miami Total Football Radio. I'm Eric Krakauer, joined by Inter Miami insider Franco Panizo. And Franco, MLS soccer finally returns to Miami after a 2-decade slumber, albeit within a dystopian context. I guess you could put it that way.
Hey, for the first time in 19 years, South Florida is going to have an MLS game that counts. So that stands for something. Obviously, not in ideal circumstances. There will be no fans at Inter Miami CF Stadium this Saturday, but it's been a long time coming, especially if you throw in the last 5 months with everything that's gone on and the point of being so close to the opener and then it being canceled or postponed 2 days before it happened. So I'm sure people will welcome it. Obviously, it doesn't happen as others would like or would have liked, but at this point, you take what you can get, given how long it's been.
Yeah, absolutely. Luis Robles saying that this isn't really going to feel like a home opener. I mean, that's stating the obvious, but it needs to be said. On this week's show, we'll preview Saturday's match, the second Sunshine Classico, as we call it here on the pod, and hopefully you do too, wherever you're listening. We'll update you about Blaise Matuidi's status as well as other personnel news, and we'll take some time to answer your questions, which sometimes are more than just one question a person. You really take liberties with your tweets.
We have passionate followers and listeners. Okay, so
we do,
and very curious ones at that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And devoted ones, it should be said. A lot of the same people, maybe the same 3 people who listen to the pod week in or week in, week out. I was going to say it's not really week in and week out given what we've been going through.
But it will be. It will be going forward because the games are coming back on a weekly basis. So we can get back to our original plan of doing this at least once a week.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully they'll be more entertaining than the matchups we've seen between Nashville and Dallas. So let's get to it. All right, Sunshine Classico 2.0 kicks off Saturday at 8 p.m. at Inter Miami Stadium in Fort Lauderdale. The first match, the MLS's back tournament opener, saw Orlando tally the first win in what we hope will become a fierce rivalry. Orlando arrives in Miami as the runner-up of MLS's back, and unquestionably, Franco, the surprise of the tournament.
Yeah, they definitely impressed and turned a lot of heads, and obviously on myself included, I'll throw myself into that bunch. I didn't expect Orlando City to get anywhere close to that, but thanks to overall solid performance from the group, well coached, well drilled, knew what they wanted to do. It was very clear that they had a style that they wanted to play, and they got very good performances from Pedro Galese in goal, as well as Nani up top, little Portuguese and Peruvian connection there, just like on this show. But I
hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, man.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
But it's MLS regular season time. The MLS is back tournament, while it will be something that is talked about when you talk about 2020 and something that the Lions are going to use to build on their season. For Inter Miami, it's all about just the resumption of the season. Put everything in the back, in the rearview mirror, and focus on what's ahead, starting with this Saturday's home opener. And it should be an interesting matchup given how both teams are coming into this one. They're very different, or in very different circumstances. Orlando City is fresh off of losing that final they played a week ago, as of today, Tuesday, when we're recording this pod. Inter Miami has not played since July 20th, I believe. So they've gone almost a whole month without a game. And that's definitely a talking point. Diego Alonso today on a video conference discussed that and mentioned that, brought that up, said that Inter Miami's at a disadvantage because they haven't played a game or gotten into that game rhythm that they've been looking for, whereas Orlando has been playing essentially nonstop for a month, and they've had 4 or 5 more games than Inter Miami to this point. So definitely something to take into consideration going into Saturday, but at the end of the day, there's no excuses. You have to win and perform, and Inter Miami needs that victory, because another loss would be 6 games without a victory.
Right, and completely different rhythms, right? And that's the point that you're making. Orlando City growing throughout the tournament. I thought they had an impressive start against Inter Miami in that first game, particularly the first 25 to 30 minutes where they were all over Miami. They were pinning them back. Their high pressure was working very well. Nani didn't have the best of games, but made the difference in that one, and then became one of the 2 candidates with Blanco of the Portland Timbers to win the MVP honors. He didn't, because Orlando did not win that game. They lost 2-1. But we are looking at a team in Orlando that clearly, as you noted, has a game plan. They have been able to create a routine with that game plan by playing various games, whereas Miami have been, as I noted in the introduction, on the outside looking in. But it must be said that with a lot of time to actually practice, a lot of time for Alonso, who hasn't had that much time with the players, or didn't before this, to implement his blueprint. This was actually practice without social distancing, right, which is what we saw when they got back to the practice field.
Yeah, it's definitely a good point to make and to bring up, because obviously before the MLS's back tournament, they only had a couple of weeks of full training before the game started. Prior to that, they were doing individual workouts at the practice facility. Then they were doing socially distanced team practices. So they didn't have a whole lot of time as a group, and they've talked about that over the course of the last few weeks and even months, that they obviously have to gain that chemistry. It's still an expansion team where players are still learning from one another, learning their tendencies on the field. The players have said they get along very well off the field, but that you can't really mimic a real game situation even in practice, and only in matches is it when you really learn about your teammates and what kind of players they are and what they like to do, what they don't like to do. So that's definitely been a thing for Inter Miami, a top talking point. Diego Alonso today also brought up that the fact that, to mitigate that lack of game rhythm, or to the difference between them and Orlando City, he or the club looked to schedule some friendlies during this downtime, but they weren't allowed to do so, which I guess explains why, like we touched on in last week's pod, that Inter Miami had an intra-squad scrimmage at the stadium with full jerseys on and the lights on in the stadium on August 8th in the evening. I guess it was to replicate as close as possible a game situation, because they're obviously lacking that.
Yeah, for sure. And a very clearly defined first team versus a second team. And some players who hadn't really played much or played at all. I'm thinking of an AJ De La Garza, for example, and we mentioned this on the last pod, actually getting on the field, and you just wonder how many players who haven't really featured will have used that as an opportunity to impress and convince Diego Alonso that they deserve an opportunity. Now, the big news here for this game is that more likely than not, we will see Leandro Gonzalez Pires starting. The big question is whether he'll start in a 3-man back line or whether it's going to be a back 4. But this is a welcome addition to the team, as we've noted before. We'll talk about Blaise Matuidi in the second segment. But the fact that they have an MLS Cup winner in the back line now, somebody who perhaps can pair up with Figal, I think that actually boosts the confidence of the team.
Yeah, so I think they touched on that today as well. Diego Alonso and Luis Robles were the two people, or the two members of the team that spoke today. And Robles said that his presence is a big boost for the club, for the back line. Diego Alonso also touched on his ability to initiate attacks and pass the ball and move the ball. That's all going to be pluses for what he brings to the table for Inter Miami. So fully expect him to start. Like you said, it's going to be interesting to see if Diego Alonso goes with that 3/5 man backline with the two wingbacks, or if he goes with a 4-man backline, and then what he does with the right back situation there, because obviously that's been a little bit of a conundrum for him, or a little bit of an issue for him to this point in the season. But Gonzalez Pires, you can probably pencil that in. I wouldn't even say pencil. You could pen that in. He'll be starting. They obviously wanted him to play at the MLS's back tournament, and were not allowed to. But he is eligible and available for this Saturday's match against Orlando City. 99.9% chance he's starting. And he's jumping. And he's going to be talking later this week to the media as well. So we'll be able to pick his brain a little bit about how things are going as well.
Right, and you'll be tweeting about that, or doing your little videos outside wherever it is that you do them. I lost my train of thought.
I'm gonna go to Aventura and do one soon, bro. I'm gonna go to in front of your place and just post up there, and then you'll see. I won't even tell you I did it. And then you'll just see it on Miami Total Football YouTube's channel, and you'll be like, "You were outside of my house."
No, you got to tell me. I'll just go to my balcony and I'll applaud you for your efforts. But let's actually talk about this match. And as I noted before, Orlando City going from strength to strength in the tournament with various players impressing. And one thing that for me became obvious about Orlando City, although some might disagree, is that this is actually a very balanced squad. And if I'm looking at any particular weakness, it would be in the number 9 role. In fact, I would add that the lack of a real scorer in the box is what hurt Orlando against the Timbers. Akindelli started that game. He didn't start all the games for Orlando. So defensively, looking at Orlando, I think that Miami should feel fairly comfortable that they can contain them. The issue becomes navigating what was a pretty good press.
Yeah, so for me, and it's interesting because I'm going to refer back to Diego Alonso's call today when I asked him about how they've taken these last 4 weeks and how they've managed the last 4 weeks since the tournament exit, and he said obviously that they've worked really hard, but he mentioned that they've been working arduously at fixing the defensive situations or issues that have cost them points in games. He didn't mention the attack, Inter Miami's attack, which to me, I think that's the bigger question mark going into this game and going towards the stretch run of the season is where are the goals going to come from? Who is going to score these goals? Because right now, to date, through 5 matches, they have 3 goals. So until they sign that DP number 9 or the DP winger or whoever's going to come in to help facilitate some chance creation, where are the goals going to come from? I think that...
Well, there's going to be no chance creation if Inter Miami can't play through Orlando City's midfield, and that was something that was blatantly obvious in the first game.
Well, so I mean, in terms of just the high pressure or the pressure, Orlando City's pressure, which did cause them trouble, especially in that first half in the MLS's back tournament. Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for them. They don't have Blaise Matuidi for this one, so that cross him off the list. It's probably going to be Will Trapp and Victor Ulloa again in the center of the park. I would like to see Lee Win get some minutes, but obviously Will Trapp and Victor Ulloa have been the one of the very few constants that Diego Alonso has had to this point. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to be very difficult. I wouldn't be surprised if Inter Miami goes again with the game plan of attacking primarily down the wings. Maybe Leandro Gonzalez Pirez's arrival will help give them an added element in terms of trying to build out or play through that press, but I wouldn't be surprised just to see Inter Miami target the wings and try to build out through the wings or attack down the wings predominantly, because that's something we've seen at least twice in Inter Miami's first 5 games.
Yeah, and what I remember mostly from that first game was how Nani, in the moments when it mattered, took over that left corridor and burned Dylan Nealis, particularly in the first goal, a change of speeds, which the the young right back couldn't keep up with, considering he's 10 years younger, but also the inability to stick with Nani and to track him when that ball comes down and he finishes it out from just outside the 6 yard.
Do you think Diego? I'm asking you now, just a straight up opinion here. Do you think Diego Alonso? If you're Diego Alonso, do you think you start Dylan Nealis again in this one?
Yeah, I do. But I would feel more comfortable starting him. First of all, because look, and of course we talked about this after that game. Dylan Nealis is a rookie, right? He just came out of college. He's got a lot to learn, and he's facing a guy who has been an elite player for his entire career, a guy who represented some huge clubs in Europe, including Manchester United, a Premier League champion, a European champion. With Portugal, I definitely had to add that there. And I think that if you sit Dylan Nealis for this game, although it's all about pragmatism and not players' feelings, you could inadvertently hurt his confidence. Here's an opportunity for you to say to Dylan Nealis, look, you actually had Nani in your pocket for a lot of the game. And part of that was because Orlando didn't play particularly well after the first 25 minutes, and maybe that's credit to Inter Miami coming out of their shell a little bit. But you did quite well. There were just a couple of crucial moments where you weren't at your best, and that ultimately made the difference. But I would feel more comfortable sending Dylan Nealis out there if I'm playing with 3 center backs, because at least you can compensate for any mistake. Somebody can shift to that right side, whether that would be Figal, which could be the obvious answer to that question, considering that he did play as a right back. So maybe the right-sided of a 3-man back line would make sense. Or even Andres Reyes, who during certain moments in certain games was quite impressive.
So from what I've heard is that they've trained in both looks, obviously the 3 center back look and the 4-man back line with 2 regular fullbacks and 2 center backs. I don't know which way they're going to go. If I had to venture a guess, I would say that he goes with a 4-man back line, but he does not start Dylan Nealis. Diego Alonso was very quick to pull the trigger on Dylan Nealis after that performance. Dylan Nealis did not start that second game against the Philadelphia Union. You saw Nicolas Figal at right back, not back at right back, but you saw him at right back. He fared okay, didn't look the most comfortable, but he fared okay there. And I think, just my opinion, just what I think Diego Alonso is going to do, I think even though he started Dylan Nealis again against New York City FC, I don't think he starts him here against Orlando City again. I think the nightmares of seeing Nani torch him in the last 10 minutes of that game and stoppage time, I think that's gonna be a painful reminder for him, and I don't think he's gonna want to roll the dice and try that again. A rookie versus a Portuguese winger with European experience that is coming off of a tournament in which he was one of the best players, like you said, one of the top 2 players in the competition, and he grew as the tournament went on. So I don't think we'll see Dylan Nealis. I think it's going to be a 4-man backline, Nico Figal at the right back spot, Leandro Gonzalez Pires with Andres Reyes in the middle, and then Ben Sweat probably back in the left back spot.
We've been talking about Nani, but another player that I think needs to be mentioned, particularly because he was one of those players who just got better as the tournament progressed, and that is Mauricio Pereira, who was playing in the hole behind Akindele in the middle. And I thought he wasn't particularly impressive in the first couple of games, but really good in the last 3 games that Orlando City played. Was good at getting Orlando out of pressure, was good at navigating tight spots, particularly against Portland. Portland sitting back and looking to hit on the counter. And he's a guy who I think, if he is given too much freedom, and in fact his growth, I think, is what also allowed Nani to become more influential, right? Because he doesn't have to force it as much. The game came more naturally to him. And one thing that we have seen Nani do in MLS is he tends to force things. He wants to make things happen. But how do you stop Pereira in the midfield? And if you play with that 4-man back line, let's say you go with a 4-2-3-1, Ulloa or Will Trapp are going to have to watch this guy. We know that Will Trapp is not the best defensively. I don't know if you want to limit Ulloa to keeping an eye on a creative player when his ability to cover a lot of grass is what makes him, I think, an important player in the 11. And I just wonder also if the three-man back line allows you to deal with Pereira a little bit better, because one of those center backs can always step to the number 10 for Orlando.
I think Miami's just going to focus more on themselves, to be honest with you. Obviously, they're going to game plan for Orlando City and try to negate their difference makers and their most talented players. But I think they're not going to game plan around Pereira. I think Nani's the guy they're going to most take into consideration, figure out a way to limit his touches or to try to get him away from goal so he receives the ball as far from goal as possible. But I don't necessarily think they're going to do anything specific with regards to Pereira other than maybe, Will Trapp and Victor Ulloa. One of you needs to keep an eye on him a little bit more than the other based on who goes forward and who stays back on a given play or in a given moment. I honestly, I think Miami's going to just try to do their game plan, play the style that Diego Alonso has said repeatedly he wants to play, that you saw spurts of against the Philadelphia Union. I think that they're going to try to have a little more of the ball, try to create a little more. And I think he's feeling the pressure a little bit. Obviously, he's 0-5, and I don't think he's anywhere near close to being at risk of getting fired. But today, somebody asked a question. It was a Spanish language media member asked a question about the team, and he said, you're off to six defeats, you have 6 losses, and Diego Alonso responded laughingly in a joking manner. He was like, it's only 5. He's only 5. Don't give me 6. Don't add on another one there. So, but I think he's feeling it. I think he knows that he needs to win. That the fan base is clamoring for a win, and that this start hasn't really been acceptable. So, I think the focus will be on Inter Miami more than it will be on Orlando City. Obviously, Nani again will be a big focal point for their defensive game plan, but I don't think that it's going to be. You're going to see Inter Miami play reactive soccer. I think you're going to see them try to play a little more proactively, especially with all the downtime that they've had and the time they've had to try to work on things.
Just to piggyback on the point that you were making about Alonso, it's interesting that they're playing Orlando, because if you are a Miami aficionado and you're looking at Alonso coming into this team and the team isn't progressing, isn't evolving, and then you look at the other bench and you see Oscar Pareja, who also just arrived this season with Orlando, and you saw the immediate impact that he had even in the first game, and you begin naturally to ask questions. However, I think it would be silly, although I agree with you that he certainly is feeling a little bit of pressure, and I don't think he feels like his job is on the line, but his reputation, perhaps. And there is a tendency for teams that lose a lot to get into a rut where their confidence is, very, very low, and then you get into this snowballing effect where you just can't get out of it. And I think it's really important that Miami I think it's important that they win this game, but more importantly than that, I think they need to be able to look at themselves after this game and go, man, there was a tangible improvement there. Nobody can point the finger at us and think we didn't improve. We did improve. We just didn't get lucky. Maybe we got a point, right? But we had chances. Gallese had to make saves. So that is going to be a very important thing. And before we put an end to this segment, a question for you, okay? So you're talking about perhaps Nealis not starting in Figal. Who do you start at left back, and who do you start up front?
Like I said, I think Ben Sweat starts at left back. I think up front. So Juan Agudelo is out because he got red carded in that loss against New York City FC. And that leaves you with Robbie Robinson, who is back with the group, and Julian Carranza. I think Julian Carranza is going to get the start. Robbie Robinson obviously was away for a while, so he's probably not as fit as you need him to be if you're Inter Miami. So I would expect Julian Carranza to get the start, and maybe he can get a goal. That's the biggest question for me, is where are the goals going to come from? So I think I think the rest of the lineup will be pretty straightforward. At least in the midfield, you'll probably see Ulloa and Trapp, Pizarro as the 10. Lewis Morgan on the right side, who I have a feature dropping tomorrow on SBIsoccer.com. I spoke to him for a full-length interview a couple weeks back and was able to write that and crank that out. So it'll drop tomorrow ahead of Saturday's game. And to wrap up the lineup on the left side, Pellegrini will probably man that spot.
Okay, very quickly, the first game you predicted between these two outfits, you predicted that Miami would beat Orlando 3-1. It ended 2-1. You also predicted that they'd score 5 goals. I think in the group stage they scored 2. I had predicted 3. So I'm going to ask you.
I had pink Kool-Aid that week, apparently.
Yeah. Well, since your predictions have been spot on, can you make a prediction for this game?
I'm going to say draw, and I'm going to say 1-1.
All right. I would say exactly the same thing. And with that, we're going to take a short break. Last week's pod was mostly centered on the rumored arrival of one Blaise Matuidi, a World Cup winner with France. It was speculation galore from the both of us. We thought he'd be announced as the third DP. Well, since then, Matuidi has put pen to paper with Miami, and not as a DP, but on TAM, targeted allocation money. And for you MLS neophytes, or for those of you who don't care about these complicated mechanisms that we also don't really care about, but we have to talk about, targeted allocation money, or TAM, are funds strategically provided by the league to teams to add or retain players that will make an immediate impact on the field. That is verbatim from the MLS
I was going to say, did you get that off of like a MLS dictionary?
Yeah, but you know what's funny about that is it doesn't really explain what it is. So perhaps you can add in simple terms a little bit of an explanation of what TAM is and give us some updates on Matuidi's arrival.
So the simplest form and the easiest way I can say is because, like you said, and like we've mentioned throughout multiple episodes of this pod, for anybody that's new to following MLS, rules are very complex. I'm not sure I even know all of them, and I've been following the league for a decade. I've been covering the league for a decade, and I don't think I know all the roster rules and mechanisms. There's always new stuff or little tweaks to the rules that are being made. Essentially, the simplest way I'll put it is target allocation money is money that you can use to sign certain types of players. Like designated players are the top players that are most expensive players. TAM would be players just below that don't necessarily hit that designated player salary threshold, but are just underneath that. So, and you only have a certain amount of that you can spend. You can obviously trade that between teams. You can trade a certain amount of allocation money between yourselves and whoever. Let's say the New York Red Bulls, for example, and you can have more. So it fluctuates from team to team on a given day, but it's just meant to add quality to the roster that's not necessarily of the DP standard.
And quality they added indeed with Blaise Matuidi coming over. Now, from your latest article, the situation as we know it is that Matuidi will arrive sometime during this 6-game stretch, but we don't know exactly when.
Yeah, so Inter Miami expects, and the plan is to have Matuidi earn some minutes and make his debut at some point during this next month, but they don't know exactly when that will be because he's still in the process of filing all the paperwork and getting approval for the visa and being able to fly over. Once he does fly over, he's going to be subject to a 14-day, or maybe not 14-day, maybe that's too many. I don't know the exact dates, but he's going to be subject to a period of time of quarantine in the United States or in South Florida, Miami, before he can partake in training and play with the team. So it's going to take some time. I think the team believes that he will probably not partake in any of the first 3 games in this period because of the turnaround. It's probably a little too tight at this point, but that at some point, maybe in games 4, 5, or 6, he'll be able to come off the bench or probably come off the bench and make his debut. So expect him to. The expectation is, and you guys can expect him to see him maybe towards the latter parts of this 6-game spell, but I don't expect that we'll see a whole lot of him until later in the season.
I think it's so funny that Blaise Matuidi is coming from Europe to the COVID capital of the world, Florida, and he's going to have to quarantine just in case he has COVID. Now, obviously, the safe thing to do, and I'm certainly not criticizing protocol, but that's good news, and hopefully we'll see him partake in that spell. Of course, something that we've mentioned quite a few times on this pod is that this is a pretty big roster, and in order to make room for Blaise Matuidi, Grant Lillard, who had moved to Miami from Chicago, has been traded away to the Columbus Crew for a 3rd-round pick, if I'm not mistaken, in the Super Draft. Yes, they still do that in MLS.
Yeah, and they still call it the Super Draft for some reason. But yeah, so Grant Lillard is gone. He never made an appearance with Inter Miami. Obviously, the one time I got to see him play up close and personal was in the second preseason game against the Tampa Bay Rowdies, and he definitely, to me, looked like a player that was a little bit out of his depth in terms of technique and trying to play the way that Inter Miami wanted to play. So I'm not too surprised that he was the one shipped out. Inter Miami's roster now stands with Lillard gone and Matuidi in at 30 players. So if Inter Miami wants to sign that DP attacker later on this season or at some point in the near future, they're going to have to make another move like that, where they're going to have to part ways with somebody or send them to the USL team, or somebody's going to have to come off the MLS roster. And I think that's a good talking point. It's something we can maybe discuss on a later show at some point, because I think that'd be an interesting exercise to see who hasn't played all that much or who could be a candidate to be axed or taken off this MLS squad. But hey, I have to say this. Credit to Paul McDonough. He knows his stuff. He knows how to operate the MLS salary budget or the salary cap, whatever you want to call it. And he got this deal done, at least for this season, on TAM. So Matuidi's not coming in as a DP, like you said. And that allows Inter Miami the flexibility to still sign a DP attacker if they can find one, if they can come to terms to one at some point in the next few weeks.
And if I'm not mistaken, this is a similar deal, or could turn out to be a similar deal to the one that Ibrahimovic signed with the Galaxy, right? Because I think he arrived as a TAM and then turned into a DP in a second season.
Yeah. I mean, I think the difference here that could be, and again, I haven't heard the full details, and I don't think anyone's reported the full details yet, but I think what might be different here is that Matuidi's coming in the middle of the season, whereas Zlatan came in towards the beginning of the season. Right. So I think his cap hit, while on a normal season, it would probably be under DP money, and I fully expect Matuidi to be a DP player come 2021. I think because of the way that the deal was made and the timing of it, he comes in at the midpoint of the season. I think his cap hit is obviously cut in half based on the way MLS structures its rules. That's why, again, I give Paul McDonough a lot of credit. He knows the system very well, and he knows how to work it and operate through it, and he got a heck of a deal done for Matuidi to get him on a TAM deal and still have that flexibility for another player. So hat tip to Paul McDonough for that one.
And by the way, not the first time that Paul McDonough has done some acrobatics to get players. He was very successful also at Atlanta United. My final 2 cents on this is that it makes total sense that Lillard is the guy who goes, not only because he, as you suggested, and I never saw him play, he was out of his depth, but the center back position is the one position I think on this team where Inter Miami really have quite a bit of depth and experience. Certainly for me, their best sector on the team. We're going to take another break. questions will be answered, and also a few words on the first broadcast that you will hear, local broadcast of an Inter Miami game. The two men on that call will be Andres Cordero and Ray Hudson.
On an individual note, as I touched on earlier, I'm all about goals and assists, and that's what I base myself on, and I want to be amongst league leaders in both of those. I'm not afraid to say it. Obviously, at the moment that may not be the case, but it's something that I expect of myself, and I'm sure if I can do that, then obviously I can help be a part of a winning side. But as always, the team comes first, and we're working hard every single day to ensure that when the season does kick off, if and when it does, we'll be ready, and hopefully we can start repaying the fans for all the faith and all the patience they've shown with the team.
All right, guys, it's Q&A time, questions and answer on Miami Total Futbol Radio. So the first one comes from at JRRC171, or a regular listener. He asked a bunch of questions, like you touched on earlier, Eric, and we've actually addressed a bunch of them. I'll read the full tweet, and then I'll hit you with which question I think we should answer. When will Matuidi come to Miami? I heard sometime in September. Robinson is finally back with the team. Do you think he'll be fit for Saturday? Will he start? What lineup do you see Inter Miami playing, 3-4-3 or 4-2-3-1? Who do you see Miami signing for the final DP spot? Suarez? So there's a lot of questions there. Eric, I'll just ask you to answer that last one. Who do you think, or who would you like to see, or who do you think is realistic at this point? You obviously cover European soccer quite a bit, so who do you think would be a potential candidate for that DP
Well, it's
spot?
interesting that we're recording this pod on a day where a list of players was released by Barcelona, players who are untouchables, which includes Lionel Messi, Frankie de Jong, and a few others. And the surprising exclusions in that list were two players. Gerard Piqué, okay, which suggests that Barcelona is open to offloading him, and the other player is Luis Suarez. Also interesting is that Ajax has already made a move, reportedly, offering 15 to 20 million US dollars for the Uruguayan to return to the club that made him famous, particularly for his biting skills. So I actually think that given that there's a DP opening in Miami, given that it is a wonderful place to live pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID, it is a paradise. It is warm all the time. You can go to the beach, and we do know from his social media that he does enjoy going to the beach, particularly in Ibiza. I think there is.
I thought you were talking about me for a second.
Yeah, he's a slightly better player. I think there's a distinct possibility that Inter Miami, if they make an offer for Luis Suarez and they make it tempting, that he at the age, 33, 34, would seriously consider coming here. So I'm going to say Luis Suarez.
I think I wouldn't rule it out, but I think it's going to be very tough to sign someone of his stature just because of the competition, like you just mentioned with Ajax. I think there's going to be so much competition. We've seen it with Cavani. We've seen it with Willian, who signed with Arsenal just a few days ago. There's so much competition. Even though these players are older, there's so much competition for their services, and teams that will pay as much, if not more, than Inter Miami probably wants to pay, and that can provide the opportunity to play Champions League, which I think all of those factors make it very difficult, which leads me to this next question, and more along the lines of where I think Inter Miami can go with that final spot. This one comes from my buddy Diego Montalvan, fellow Peruvian, covers the Peruvians in MLS, does an excellent job bringing the news on the day-to-day about Peruvians, not only in MLS but around the world. Obviously, his @ is @D Montalvan. He says, "When can I get your autograph?" And he puts a laughing emoji, but says, "No, but seriously, in case that Farfan goes to Miami, how would he fit in Alonso's team?" So there have been rumors in recent days about Jefferson Farfan, the Peruvian attacker. He's not a number 9. He's more of a 10, but he's older now. He's 35. He's coming off a long injury, but he is on a free because his club, Lokomotiv Moscow in Russia, decided not to bring him back. He is on a free. So there are rumors that there are conversations between his agent and the club. I don't know how true or valid those are, but I think in terms of addressing that DP spot, I think someone, I'm not saying Farfan exactly, but someone along that, maybe that situation, it will be where Inter Miami goes with, in terms of a player that's on a free, a player that maybe is a little bit older, but can still do the job. He might not be a Cavani, he might not be a Suarez, but someone that can do the job, score some goals, bring quality to the side, and that is maybe a little bit more of a risk because of health or form or other factors, but that is a little more financially feasible or realistic within what Miami wants to pay. And again, if he's older, like a Farfan, 35, almost 36, he can be a stopgap solution, a year and a half in Miami, and then you move on and find a younger number 9, or you hope that one of your number 9s on the roster has developed into something a little more significant up top.
Yeah, but there's only one problem with this scenario, and that's that Farfan is not a 9, right?
Well, but he's played 9 as he's gotten a little bit older. He can score goals, and he can score goals.
Right, he can score goals, but he's certainly not a prolific scorer. I really like Farfan. I've liked him for a long time. He was stupendous in the Eredivisie in the Netherlands.
I think he's an incredible player. He's an incredible player.
He's got incredible skill. He is strong, man. The guy, he's like a tree trunk with a lot of skill. He's good from set pieces, although with Peru, not usually the guy responsible for taking them because of Cuevas on that team, but. I think he'd be added value for Inter. I'm just not sure that's the player you're looking for, because essentially he could play as that number 9, but is he going to score that many goals? Maybe he is, because he's playing Major League Soccer and financially it makes sense. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just don't think he fits the profile of the player that is necessary, but there is no doubt in my mind that he would improve the team even at his age.
I'm not saying Farfan's going to come. I haven't heard that's tangible. Again, it's just rumors that have been coming out in the last couple of days. I think, again, a player like in his situation, similar to his situation, is where Miami's going to have to go with that spot, unless they can find a way to hit a home run. Before midnight, because the clock is ticking. I think they're going to have to settle. They're going to have to make some sacrifices. So again, Farfan, let's just use him as an example. He's not out and out number 9, but he can score goals. He has experience playing there, and his quality will more than likely shine in MLS. And if you can get him or someone like him on a discount because of their health situation or because of their age, if you can convince them, hey, look, you know what, you're a risk here, but we'll take you, but we're going to take you at this price, I think they can absolutely find a deal. Again, I'm not saying it's going to be for Farfan, but someone like that situation. I don't think they're going to get a huge superstar like they were talking about, or like they had attempted to. So I think that will be more along the lines of what they have to do, or the direction they're going to need to go into to fill that spot.
You make a good argument, my friend. Well, it's time to wrap this up. But before we do, I think that's it for questions, right? I'm not jumping.
We actually just got another one just now, literally it says 18 seconds ago on my phone, but it's a question we've already answered. It's from Lloyd Hailbrun, at Lloyd Hailbrun. He says, why can't Matuidi play right away? He has stated he has already had COVID and tested negative in Italy, so he should be good to go. Like we said before, he's still working on the paperwork process. That's the point that's going to take some time. That's customary for most of these type of signings, that you never really know or have an exact date or an exact process for how quick it is. Sometimes it's super fast. Sometimes it can be a little bit longer. So that combined with the mandatory quarantine that he's going to have to go into once he flies into the United States is why he can't play right away.
Yeah. We shouldn't have answered that question from Lloyd Hailbrun because he doesn't follow me on Twitter. So that's going to be the policy from now on. You need to follow both of us. Something else you guys are going to have to do there at home is actually leave some reviews, because I actually went to look at them, and I don't usually do that. And the last one we got was months ago. So I don't know what you're doing with your free time.
No. See, now you're misinformed, Eric, and that's a no-no on this pod. We actually got a very good review from a friend of the pod. Andres at Colo Blanco. He wrote, great pod for Inter Miami fans. This pod has a great mix of two experts, or at least people that know their stuff. Franco knows MLS like the back of his hand. Eric knows European soccer football like a European, ? Still, the banter is great. The pod has a great balance. Inter Miami fans have another great pod. Subscribe. That was from Andres.
And so I stand corrected. That was a great review, Andres. You didn't have to lie about Franco, but we appreciate
somebody gave us a 2 though.
Did.
Somebody they didn't write it, but somebody gave us a 2-star rating. It's our first 2-star rating. I'm devastated. I wish I could find out who it was.
Well, to be honest, I think that's a pretty good assessment of our pod, a 2-star pod. But just before we end, one of the things that I said before we went into the break is that this is going to be the first opportunity for Inter Miami supporters to listen to the broadcast of Andres Cordero and Ray Hudson, two of my colleagues at BN Sports. I can tell you that both of them are pumped about doing their first broadcast, and I'm very interested to hear what you guys have to say. So you can leave that in your comments. And just to say my piece, I think that Inter Miami is going to have one of the best MLS commentary duos in the country for sure. But again, I am biased, and I will let you know that if you say anything negative, I will make sure to tell them, especially Dre.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say. I mean, then you have to tell them what I'm gonna say, because look, I think Andres, like we said many shows ago when the deal was first announced, I think he is flown under the radar in American soccer. I think he's a great at what he does. I think he's going to be a real gem. Ray Hudson's obviously a big name. But his style is very polarizing. Some people like him, some people don't like him, and I think that there it's going to be kind of hit and miss. I think as a tandem, they'll do a phenomenal job. But I'm not the biggest Ray Hudson fan when it comes to the commentary, but I think that they're going to do a heck of a job. I think they're definitely going to be well received overall by the local market, but I mean not by everybody.
And with that final thought, we've come to the end of this week's podcast.
Before you wrap it up, we also have to mention this game will also be broadcast on TUDN locally. So in Spanish, there will be a commentary team as well. I don't think that they have a set duo. I think it's going to be a rotation depending on who's on a given day. But it will also be on TUDN for the people that prefer to listen to the game in Spanish. So
okay, I was just about to add a reminder that we will be back on a weekly basis now that the games are off and running again, starting with a review show of what happens this Sunday.
Right, because there's a quick turnaround as well for the next game after this home opener. There's Inter Miami plays another game next Wednesday, so instead of doing our regular Monday setup that we had planned for, we'll do something on Sunday to recap Orlando City and to preview the following game.
And there you go. Don't forget to also follow us on all your social media platforms, and once again, leave a nice review. That's it. Until next time, big soccer heads.